Welcome back, everyone. In episode 45, I chat about employer branding and people comms, having a seat in the boardroom. I chat with Emma Coleman. Emma is employer brand strategy manager at Caraffi. Caraffi are a talent and advisory consulting firm. Now, without hiring and retaining the right talent, you just don't have a business, or certainly not a successful one. So why are the people responsible for that not represented enough in the boardroom? Emma and I chat about the seat at the table, being more consultative, connecting with the bottom line of a business, and influence through personal branding. Let's get on with the chat. Hi Emma, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Chris, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good to catch up. It's been so we used to work at Havas together, Havas people together. So
Yeah,
it was great. We've kept in touch on LinkedIn and seen each other's posts and I thought, I saw a few of your posts and I thought, well, actually it's time to catch up with Emma and let's have a chat on the pod. So what part of the country are you dialing in from? Are you talking from?
so I'm remote permanently now. So I am calling in from my home, which is in East London. So I think we've started to go out and visit clients again, which was fantastic. I was on client site yesterday, but predominantly I'm at home. So that's me today.
Good stuff. Yeah, I'm North London, so a lot of my work is remote. That's for sure. But
Yeah,
it's nice to be able to get back into offices and just spend a bit of time in person rather than just face to face online.
it is actually. Sure. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
Really nice.
So let's have the kind of the topic of a chat is going to really talking about employer branding and kind of the seat at the boardroom table for employer branding, and kind of how taking that consultative approach or how taking a consultative approach can change the impact of employer brand. So let's spin this off by let's just start talking about why do you think why should employer brand leaders have a seat in the boardroom?
Definitely. I mean, I think this is something that I joined Caraffi a year and a bit ago now, and Caraffi have positioned themselves as a talent advisory. And I think partly, if I go back to kind of my interview with Graham Paxton, who's our CEO, he's got this real fundamental belief that HR can and should do more. And that works around having that seat at the table. And I think the more and more, and this is something that I've talked to clients about over many years, that I've been kind of doing employer branding is moving into more of this strategic role. And I think the last, what we're looking at now, like 2 years, and then the changes that have come about due to the pandemic have just kind of, I think, really shone a spotlight on the fact that if we have a company purpose and a mission, and that's something that we're talking about, and we know what our direction and flow is, people are fundamental to that. And so the HR team or the talent team, whatever you want to call it, really are integral to that and attracting the talent into the business that is needed to hit those goals and objectives and missions for the future. And I think 100%. Certainly the more and more kind of talking to clients, and certainly something we're seeing at the moment, is this change is so rapid and it's so quick, and the market is so hot at the moment and busy that it's almost all hands to the pump. And everyone's really ingrained in this kind of tactical doing the work and getting the people into the business. And I think part of this having a seat at the table is that HR need to be, or the talent advisory teams, talent acquisition teams need to be far more strategic. And in order to do that, I mean, of course, when you've got the perfect storm like you've got at the moment where it is so busy, you need to make processes a lot easier and almost automate as much as possible so as you can free up time for specialists to spend looking at the bigger picture and positioning themselves within a business fundamentally, so as they can drive the change that is needed. And I think that's how it kind of came about. And it's certainly something that seems to be being spoken about more and more and more within the clients that we visit, certainly. Anyway.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's like, I suppose, we've both been in the employer marketing space, recruitment marketing. I mean, it's like, I think there's so many different terms, aren't there? But let's call it people comms space. We've been doing that for certainly a good few years. I dare not say how many years, but I think kind of my view is, I know we've talked about this over the years, is that ultimately, if you don't have your people, if you don't have people in an organization, then you don't have anything. Okay, you could argue that, well, if we're someone's building software and the software's done, then you sell that software. You still need people to sell it. You still need people to maintain it. So if you don't have your people, you have absolutely nothing else. So that seat at the boardroom is kind of just makes sense, but it's not there enough, is it? And I'm kind of wondering why it isn't. And it's like, kind of, I don't know, my take on it. It'd be good to listen to kind of your thoughts on it as well. But my take on it is that typically, it's the roles in the business that are so obviously connected to making money are the roles that tend to make it to boardroom, make it to CEO. So and I'm not picking out any particular industries here, but when I say that, I think okay, well, the high flying salesperson, high flying finance person, the high flying marketing person. These are all things that you can absolutely connect to easily and obviously connect to the bottom line, but it's ultimately the people that are running that business that are the ones that deliver that bottom line. But that connection is difficult. That's kind of my view. What are your thoughts?
It's really interesting because it's true what you say. It's quite often the CFO or the CMO who will step up to take that senior position. And I think we've seen so much change. You quite rightly said, Chris, we've been in the industry quite a long time. And if you think about our industry and the changes that we've had over that period, we kind of flipped more into a transactional period. And I think the last 18 months, everyone's looking for that psychological safety, and people buy into people, not necessarily businesses, which is a bit contradictory to what we kind of say. And that obviously we work with companies to understand specifically in my team, and what I do, work with companies to understand their value proposition and what makes them a great place to work. But ultimately, if you don't have someone delivering that story who is authentic and credible and sells that story in a way that is understandable and relatable, then it's really going to fall flat. And we've seen over the years that movement towards employee engagement and building ambassadors and advocates for the business from your employee base. And I think that is partly it's about creating this workforce who are going to drive the business. And I think retrospectively, we've always looked back, as you said, in that the business takes a look at, okay, who's traditionally made the biggest difference to the bottom line. Whereas now we're seeing companies start to think, okay, we need to be more forward thinking. We can't plan and look back on, okay, last 5 years, who's made the biggest difference to the bottom line? That's the person who needs to be promoted. It's then overlaying that with, well, where do we want to go as a business, and who's going to have the biggest impact on that? And that's where your people teams come into play.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that kind of, it's the, kind of really in the next few years, this decade, and certainly going into next decade. Oh my goodness, 2030s. But yeah, certainly going into next decade is seeing people in those people comms, people management roles actually being CEOs.
Yeah.
Because you think about the kind of areas you touch is there's marketing, it's internal comms, employee engagement. It's it's the brand as well. It's culture. It's all of those things and more wrapped into one. So people who are close to that, and especially people who can kind of look at what they do, people comes in the wider context of connecting what they do to the bottom line more, then you definitely hope that in this decade and definitely going into next decade that you see more people from people comms at CEO level. So not just at the table, but leading that table.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And I hope that that's really the best thing we can hope for moving forward, especially in this period of change, and forward looking. I think we will start to naturally see that. Certainly, we're hearing lots of clients talking about long-term planning, and having more visibility than ever before on long-term plannings and long-term solutions, future-proofing. So yeah, it's interesting.
That thing about visibility. So what's with the visibility thing, it's like what kind of things are you seeing people doing that give them that visibility? Because someone listening will be going, okay, well, I agree with this, absolutely, but what are the things that needs to be done to be visible? What have you seen in terms of what's actually happening, or what people see when they look a few years down the line?
Yeah, I think it is a lot around this kind of, the typical challenges that like the talent functions kind of face. It's that all have an impact on the bottom line. So whether that's rebuilding an underperforming function, or looking at future workforce planning, tackling talent acquisition challenges, which are only getting more difficult at the moment in the current hot market, and then wanting to drive better performance internally. So how can you kind of maximize and I guess really light a fire under that performance piece to make sure everyone is working and the bottom line is being impacted in a positive way. And I think they're the kinds of things that we're seeing. And if they can be tackled, and this is in volume as well and in niche, and I think if they can be tackled, then that only serves to shine a spotlight on these individuals at boardroom level.
Yeah, as I've seen over the years, is this kind of talk about firefighting. This thing about, okay, we really need to hire people, and so therefore, let's just put vacancies out there.
Yeah.
We need to get these people. Time to hire is really important because the business is desperate for people, or business needs to grow a part of the business. So time to hire is the most important one of the most important signifiers of success here. And I've spoken to people on this podcast, and they've said, there are companies that treat their recruitment teams as like firefighters. Look, we just need someone. Can you go out and get it? Which then encourages that kind of a spray and pray type of approach, or it kind of encourages thinking, okay, well, I think in my kind of episode notes when we chatted about it the other week is this thing about siloed projects. Is it siloed projects? Okay, well, we're doing employer brand project, and if the stakeholders, the senior stakeholders, know what employer brand is, I've heard in instances where employer brand is an EVP is banned as a term. There's like, well, what does it even mean? So there's a bit of kind of the use of language there to sell something in, but I think is there an issue there that has results in people not being at that top table, like siloed, firefighting, siloed projects, do an employer brand, create a website, create some assets, create a toolkit, and then that's it.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, would never advocate working on those projects in silo, because they all have an impact on each other. And obviously as well, I do believe there's an educational piece as well in that. I think EVPs and employer branding is a word lots of people are familiar with, and terminology that lots of individuals are familiar with. But when you actually start drilling down and asking questions, it becomes apparent that it's not fully understood, and it's not fully obvious what the benefits of having a strong employer value proposition that differentiates you and is built on your aspirations for the future, as well as the authentic, credible experience that your candidates, that your talent is currently experiencing. I think there's benefits to that are not fully understood, and how that in itself can impact the bottom line. And then, of course, we've always talked about this, because you never build an employer brand or build an EVP and then start generating an employer brand around it and then leave it. It's an ever-growing beast, and it needs to constantly be revamped. And certainly with what's going on at the moment, everything's changing, and it's changing so quickly. Your employees' views and what they like about working with you will probably change incredibly quickly too. So the worst thing you can do is build an EVP and then go, okay, this is it. Let's start stamping this all over everything. That's what we stand for, because it will change and evolve, and it should do. That's part of a test and learn growth mindset.
Exactly.
And I think,
not kind of go on.
No, go on. What were you going to say?
No, go on. Yeah, you're in full flow there. Interrupted. Go
on. I was just going to say, I just think it is and I think that ties into that shift in mentality of the talent team as well, in that we're moving more towards growth mindsets, which is less around here's the solution, that's it, and more around let's move into an evolving test and learn, and change things that don't work, like admit when things are not working and tweak it and move, like actually listen to our people, rather than telling everyone what we're great at. Let's build it from grassroots up.
So there's a I suppose there's a challenge there that there's a focus on the means rather than the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
Employer brand. Yep. Website. Yep. Toolkit. Yep. Internal comms project. Launch. Yep. Job ads are all consistent. Yep. But that's all a mean to the end. And actually, by taking that, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to do this episode together, is this thing about taking that consultative approach. So the end is actually going, well, let's see how this fundamentally impacts your bottom line, isn't it? So when you take that more consultative mindset, then it's not disjointed, is it?
No, exactly. And holistically, you look at how that impacts everything, and how that needs to be experienced across everything. And there'll be, there's never a one size fits all, or an employer brand, an EVP that you launch and you're like, oh, that's it. It's fantastic. That's the eureka moment. It is constantly evolving. And that is that consultative piece that you mentioned, Chris, in that kind of partnering and working together, and having a company or a person who can take a holistic view and a step back to say, okay, how is this working? And that person is not necessarily the one who is fighting fires, as you said. It's not necessarily the recruitment team. It's someone who sits in a more senior role, who can view all of those elements, and also knows the vision and the goals that are in mind in terms of talent and people for the future, and weave all of those together.
So how, I suppose, in terms of kind of talking to the right people, I suppose there's an element of, if you're a partner of an organization, is having access to more senior stakeholders, but also, there is that thing about individuals within people functions, within an organization, having the right access to the most senior people as well. And I suppose how does one get that access?
That's a really good question, and I think
it's the magic answer.
It's the magic. It's the golden goose egg, isn't it? But I think as well, it's about, there's an element of building your own profile internally, but having some having robust data and points that you can raise and bring to the table, that and understanding what the business's focus is and how that impacts you and your team, and what your team can do to impact that, vice versa. I mean, you mentioned it yourself when you were talking about data, and I think everything that we do, so the company that I work for, Caraffi, everything is kind of built on data, and we make sure that our clients have the data insights and expertise they need to identify any potential skills gaps that there might be, and help them find ways to kind of combat those and work around those. And I think you mentioned it totally, in that it's time to hire, but there's so many other data points as well that the talent team have access to that back up those stories. There's the DE and I elements, there's the internal mobility, there's the retention, there's the time to hire and cost to hire, cost to train. So they've got access to all of those. And I think it takes a little bit of the person to bang that drum and push for a seat at the table. But then I think if they understand, and most talent individuals, when you talk to them, they've got very clear line of sight of where the business is going. And if you combine that with the data that they've got access to, it's a pretty powerful story.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's that there's an element there. So there's the data side of things absolutely is like really, really important. And I suppose it's the case of teams having the time to be able to access that data, because as you say, the data's there. It's just about the case of just hoovering it up and then, even more importantly, gleaning directional insight from it. Then also, kind of interesting what you touched upon there, kind of makes me think of like personal brand. Now, personal brand is often people who like roll their eyes and go, "Oof, God, personal brand." But actually, and I think I'm seeing this even more on LinkedIn. Of course, it's absolutely true. Is that people in people comms roles, absolutely, if they're not at the top table, have an opinion and voice that deserves to be at the top table. So even if that if that team or those individuals aren't at the top, it's about having that opinion, and sharing that on LinkedIn, and taking up all those opportunities to to get on podcast. That's not. I wasn't intentional. I wasn't the invitation for
shameless
anyone
plug
to come
there.
on. Yeah, no, but it's I think it kind of doing things like getting on podcasts is important. That thing about not necessarily thought leadership. So I think thought leadership suggests that everyone who's a thought leader has to have a very unique, no one else has opinion about something, and they have to be at the absolute top of their game, or absolute kind of the very top of a business to be a thought leader. It's basically opinion, and individuals in the people comm space have that opinion. So the more they can share that, the better. And I suppose there's also that thing about being a salesperson as well. Not to say a person who can just sell anything, but there is that. I suppose connection with personal brand, but being able to just having the confidence to sell something in as well, isn't it?
The eloquence to share your thoughts and do that with conviction. And so many talent people that we talk to do have those personalities. They're in the perfect job, and that's why it's just kind of like, okay, how do we support you to get that share of voice, and that seat at the table, because you've got a strong argument here, and a strong piece to share. You just need to be able to back it up, and then showcase how you can weave that into business objectives. But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting challenge.
I suppose there's that balancing between kind of EQ and IQ, isn't it? There's that emotional intelligence that you're, not to say other areas I'm going to have, emotional intelligence, but I think, you look at people comm side of things. I'd imagine if you gathered some sort of data, you probably see that typically people are more, they score higher in any emotional intelligence testing. than other parts of the business, perhaps.
I think now we're shifting towards more of a it's a business function in its own right that can add to the bottom line. And you have to have a makeup of those strategic thinkers and those sales folk that you were talking about, Chris. So I think we're seeing a shift in dynamic and that kind of HR. We still talk about kind of HR advisors and HR, but then we've kind of developed this talent, this TA team. You have the TA team, and they're a bit different to the HR function. So it's understanding all of the kind of idiosyncrasies within the team makeup.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, I think. And there's that thing about when you talked about that, it made me think of kind of, the balance between hard skills and soft skills. It's hard, hard skills of knowing your particular subject and, and having very specific, experience to bring to something. But then there's the soft skills, which shouldn't really be called soft skills, which is, empathy, compassion, there's all these things that are, of course, so important to a business. So those, kind of ditching the soft skills thing and actually knowing that soft skills aren't actually soft skills. They're probably harder, more important skills than the hard skills. Of course, though, the balance between the two is important as well, especially when you're dealing with a future that an organization may not necessarily know about, which means you may not have the experience to do it. So you can't draw upon the hard skills to help you navigate that, or you can't purely rely on those hard skills to help navigate that on a certain future. I'm really guessing on a bit now, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we could chat. I
was going to say we could talk about that for a long time.
We could, but maybe we do get another episode in. But I think I'm conscious you're busy and everything. But I think that's probably about done on our time actually on that. But it's I really appreciate it. It's good to catch up and shoot the breeze about things. So thanks for joining.
You're welcome. It's really good to catch up, and I think it's a really interesting time for us in this space at the moment. So there's so much going on that there's so much we could talk about. We could go on forever.
Well, have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one, Chris. I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the chat. If you did, feel free to subscribe to get future episodes, and please do share the podcast with others. It really does make a difference.